And we're live on the air. Welcome everyone to another episode of Monk Radio. We've got a lot of good questions being asked on radio.sirimangalo.org. And we got the live Q&A feature active on YouTube. So if you're watching this live on YouTube, you can, or wherever the video is embedded, I think, you should be able to click on the Ask a Question, and they will appear to us here in the Hangout, and we will answer them. So another thing I wanted to do, so I think we'll start off with this, is something that I think needs to be done and that I've maybe been remiss in. So my general tendency or inclination is to not respond to comments on the internet because it's a little bit chaotic and overly interactive, it feels, as a monk. But I often get criticisms, and I do read most of them. Some part of it is just looking for gross obscenity or vulgarity or insult and so on, to ban people, and of course zealous Christians who will often post stuff about Jesus on my videos, how I'm going to hell and so on. But it also means I pick up valid criticisms, and I've never really had a means of responding, or I've never responded to them. And part of it is a fear that if I encouraged it, then it'll be opening the floodgates, and suddenly I'd be overwhelmed by people criticizing me just so that they can get a response, knowing that I'm going to respond. So when you don't respond, it limits criticisms to kind of more valid or pressing criticisms, I guess. Like once there was someone called me out on the fact that I said ignorance doesn't have a cause, because it seemed to me that it didn't. And so I've since then explained my position on that, because the Buddha actually says that ignorance does have a cause, but the way he's saying it is not in terms of an original cause or something that gave rise to ignorance. It's just that which, it's really that which makes ignorance persist, causes ignorance to persist. So it's not a cause in terms of giving rise to it. Ignorance is there because of the 5 hindrances. Anyway, rightly called me out, and so that was nice to have. So what I'm going to do now, to cut to the chase, is respond to a recent criticism about one of my monk radio videos. I believe, I guess I'm going to do a video about this, because it's kind of interesting. Hope I'll get it right. Okay, so I'm going to start my recording. Are we all ready to record? I guess so. That's not quite. Okay. So, recently I did a video about I don't even remember what the video was about, but at one point I explained that, it was about the self, I think, and I said that I was ranting, I was off on a tangent that somehow related to the question, and I said that the body, for example, is unnatural. And since then, I think 3 or 4 people at least have called me out on that and said, how can you say that the body is unnatural? It was a wrong choice of words. And I guess it really struck a chord with people who didn't agree with that. But I stand by it. And I'd like to explain myself, exactly what I meant by the word unnatural. First of all, the word unnatural is unnatural, which I've just found out makes it ontological. It's an example of itself. In nature, or from outside of the realm of humanity, everything is natural. So you might say that Buddhism shares that opinion, though I'm not convinced that it does. Maybe that the Buddha would have maybe said everything is natural. Maybe, but maybe not. I don't think that there's any proof either way. But either way, the word unnatural itself is a human construct. So we delineate what is natural and what is unnatural. And I think that there are two senses that we use it in. The first is something that is perverse. So I obviously wasn't using this the definition of the word unnatural. So if someone says that pedophilia is unnatural, or no, I don't know if that's even a good example. Maybe eating feces is unnatural. Something that is perverse. What's a good example, Robin, of something that's perverse? Do you get that sense? Something that's unnatural?
Both of those were very perverse, so yeah. Go with
but,
those.
So we'd call that unnatural in a sense of, it's kind of, I suppose, Judeo-Christian in a sense of going against some godly, divine intention. But I think in Buddhism we could at least accept that there are certain things that are perverse, and by that we mean unnatural. The second sense is simply the human well, the first one's a human construction as well, but the second is the idea that the difference between something that is made by humans and something that exists in the natural realm, or as Buddhists we might expand that to say something that was created by a sentient being, explicitly created or intentionally, I don't know, maybe not intentionally, but explicitly created by a sentient being. And as we know, the reason we limit it normally to humans is that most sentient beings in this world, in this realm, don't create things. But if we expanded it, we might say that an anthill or a termite mound is unnatural. But modern Western scientists would say, no, it's natural because it's not human-made. So we consider that something artificial is something that is created by human beings. It is a arbitrary distinction, but I think it's a useful one because there are clearly those things that exist outside of active, maybe you could say intentional human. I guess you'd say intentional human construction. The body is not one such thing, and it's a key point it's a key belief or theory or claim in Buddhism that distinguishes it from modern Western science, which will say that the body evolved naturally based on natural selection. Now we consider that to be a limited, partial explanation of how things happened. Now, indeed, the environment has dictated to some extent how the human form has evolved, but the point I wanted to make is that we are, in the end, essentially responsible for creating, through our decisions, from life to life to life, we're responsible for creating the form that we find. The reason that, and so the point, the importance of this is that without understanding it, we tend to think of the human form as being somehow the default. Right? The human form is somehow a part of what it means to exist in the universe, and therefore, as a result, we get questions about sexuality. We say, well, giving up sexuality, how can you say that? How can you do that when it's a part of nature? It's a part of being human, and the implication there is that somehow that means something. That because something is a part of what it means to be human, then therefore it's natural. And that I disagree with fervently, and that's what the sort of thing I was trying to get at. anything that you can pass off as being natural simply because it's the way it's what humans do, eating food, breathing, having sexual intercourse, any of these things, there's no reason to think that they are in any way, I guess, right or in any way the default. They're a part of this artificial construct or artificial set of experiences that has been created through our specific, repeated behavior, patterned behavior. So we by acting in a certain way, we've evolved um, to become human beings. And so basically the point being there that the mind was partially, at least partially, if not mostly, involved with the creation of the human form. I guess it's an artificial distinction, but it means something in the sense that there's nothing to the human form that is in any way special. Any set of experiences that are specific to humanity, for example, those involving sexuality, those involving digestion or ingestion of food, are by no means special. They're still just experiences. The truth about nature is it's experience in some way. The question of whether the six senses are intrinsic to nature is an interesting one, like whether there could be a seventh sense or any number more senses. I imagine there could be, and I imagine the difference between, say, smelling and tasting is it's not really, chemically speaking, I don't think it's that different. It's just different organs that do it. I don't know that you could actually claim that there's anything different between the six senses. The six senses themselves may simply be a product of the artificial state of detecting the environment. But in any case, experience is the ultimate building block of nature. Humanity is not a natural thing. It's an artificial construct, like a sandcastle. A human being is as natural as a sandcastle. Sandcastle is not by some definition it's unnatural. You go to the beach and you don't say, oh, look what the waves did, or look what formed by the wind. It's clear that the sandcastle was put there, built intentionally, and the human form to some extent is similar, which is not nearly as obvious as the sandcastle, especially based on modern Western science, which tries to deny that and saying that it just arose based on a series of unconscious. I mean, I guess the point is that modern science still hasn't, to my knowledge, adequately incorporated consciousness into the mix. Although if you did, then you would say that consciousness is natural and nothing would be unnatural. So in one sense, as I said, everything is natural. But the only reason we use the word unnatural is to describe something that is specifically intentionally constructed by humanity. Now, we weren't aware. It was unconsciously. Like we weren't saying, "Hey, let's build a human body," obviously, but through our choices, we have altered ourselves. Is all I was trying to say. It's maybe because it's unconscious, it may not be exactly. No, but it's still artificial and it's still unnatural. An unnatural thing doesn't have to be consciously created, but created through one's activities, like a garbage heap is created through one's activities, or an ant hill. Even though they may not have wanted to make a hill, it's created because of the ants digging and the sand accumulate. So because it was consciously created by sentient beings, we therefore call it unnatural. So there's my defense, and it's an important one because it helps us it reminds us not to take the human form too seriously. Hope that helps. Right. And meanwhile, we've got frenetic activity Welcome, everyone. Thank you for the questions. Okay, so I guess we'll take some live questions. We consider that canned, something canned already. Let's do something live. You want to read that one off?
Sure. It, just the top one, or are you going to select
Uh,
one you want to
I
read?
selected. Oh, you guess you don't see it. Is there a balance?
Oh, is there a balance to be struck between worldly pursuits and letting go for a layman? Should any kind of ambitions, career goals, preferred professions be allowed? If any desire is considered false, what of the desire for nirvana?
You know what? If we're going to make a video, I have to press record before you start speaking, right?
Okay.
You want to... Let's make a video. Go for it.
Is there a balance to be struck between worldly pursuits and letting go for a layman? Should any kind of ambitions, career goals, preferred professions be allowed? If any desire is considered false, what of the desire for nirvana?
There's another question on the moderator site, our Google moderator site, that says it's even better than this one. It's kind of a unique formulation. Although I've heard the question many years ago. The question is, I've started to practice something like I've started to practice meditation, and I can feel myself losing my sexual desire, and I'm afraid that I'm not going to be able to perform. I'm afraid if I lose my lust, I won't be able to be with my wife anymore. And how can I balance my practice but still, how can I not accidentally, how can I be sure I'm not going to accidentally lose something that's precious to me? It's important to me. It's not the same question as this one, but it's along the same lines. But you're talking about two opposite things in one sense, and um, so I guess this is where the concern arises, because clearly any even superficial reading of the Buddha's teaching shows us that Buddhism considers any craving, any clinging, any ambition whatsoever, any desire basically, to be unwholesome. Depending what you mean on the word desire, and we get into big arguments about this. I got into an argument some time back with people who tried to say that desire can be beneficial. So it's a matter of semantics, what exactly you mean by the word desire. But worldly pursuits definitely is quite there's quite a clear implication in the Buddhist teaching that worldly pursuits are antithetical to the to progress towards enlightenment. So how do you strike a balance? It's like striking a balance between drinking alcohol and sobriety. They're opposites. It's one or the other. If you want to do them both, then it's a tug of war. You're being pulled in both directions, and you have to understand that. That's the first part of the answer. The second part is to understand that it doesn't, in reality, it doesn't work that way. There isn't a choice being made. Like, I'm going to practice this much, or I'm going to hold on to these things, I'm going to let go of those. So you could accidentally make the wrong choice, and whoops, you've let go of something, and that's a real shame because you still like it. It can't happen, because as long as you don't, because what people don't realize is how profound and complete insight into reality is. It really is insight. It really is understanding. It's not a book. We think of it like our only example, only comparison, is book learning. And so we think it's something like you look up in a book and you get it. You say, oh yeah, I agree with Socrates or Kant or Schopenhauer. I agree with these guys, and therefore I know it. That's my understanding. I understand this theory of reality or this philosophy. It's not like that. The understanding that you gain from meditation is real understanding of the truth. So it's not something to worry about. It's only going to come if it really and truly is 100% for benefit, for good, for it is only 100% a positive thing. So this irrational fear people have of nirvana. You hear about nirvana, you think, whoa, that sounds scary. I mean, leaving the world behind, that sounds like I have to be careful I don't fall into that, right? Nirvana is based on a perfect realization of the truth. That's all you have to know. If you can meet anyone who says they want to delude themselves, or if you ask someone whether they want to delude themselves into thinking that that which is unpleasant is actually pleasant, no one in their right mind, I think, would answer yes. That's something that is hurting you. Would you rather carry the belief that it is bringing you happiness? Or would you like to know that it's hurting you when it is in fact hurting you? That's really the question we have to be asking, because the truth that you're going to see is that those things which you think are bringing you pleasure, bringing you happiness, are actually hurting you, are actually a cause, without question, without doubt, without any qualifier, are bringing you unqualified suffering. That is what we mean here. So there was where I heard this question was, I heard it in Thai. This Lumpon Chodok, this monk in Bangkok, one of the big Vipassana meditation teachers, about 30, 40 years ago. He had a Western person, I think it was a Western person, come up to him and say to him, I'm really afraid. I feel myself letting go, and I really love my girlfriend, so I'm afraid that I'm going to let go of something, and I don't want to let go of my love for her. And it's not something you have. His answer was, don't worry about it. There's lots of defilements left you don't have to worry about them all disappearing. And his point was that it's really not that easy. You don't just one day wake up and or one day come out of a meditation session and suddenly, whoops, you've got no more desires left. It's really a painful, arduous process of realization that forces you to rethink or see things in a new way. See things in a new way, see things differently. So definitely not something you have to worry about. Now, it's actually not exactly what it's not answering everything that you're asking here. So let's be more concise and to the point based on what we've just talked about. So the balance I've talked about, it's not really a balance, it's a tug of war. You have to understand. But that being said, I think the concise answer is to continue what you're doing. And until you understand or have some reason to believe that these things are causing you suffering, then don't worry so much about them. Focus more on self-investigation or investigation of reality than on condemning or denouncing certain activities. So all in due time, once you see that those activities are causing you suffering, then it is proper to abandon them. To abandon them first works in certain instances, but in the deeper ones, it will not. In the long run, it'll come and hit you. It'll get, what do you call it? It'll come back to you because you're ignoring or you're smoothing over the fact, overlooking the the fact that you don't really see those things as harmful. So if you just say, I'm going to give up all sensuality, uh, and so until you just stop it and try to live your life like that, unless you truly, without really truly understanding that it's wrong for you, this is the wrong way to go about things. You might want to, what you should do is put everything aside, put aside your worldly pursuits, and investigate them. You can't just put them aside and try to live your life without the proper investigation. That's what I'm saying. So this is why the Buddha allowed all these things, because he encouraged people to, lay people anyway, into self-exploration. Now, if you want to take up the sort of self-exploration that would allow you to give these things up, then you give them all up, but at the same time practice the type of intensive meditation that will allow you to see that they're wrong. Simply, for example, becoming a monk and not practicing meditation, but giving up all sensuality and living your life as a perfect example of Buddhist morality. No worldly pursuits, no sensual indulgences, etc., etc. So maybe you can live in a cave, not speak, just seclude yourself from reality, but without actually investigating the problem to give up the attachment, will in the end do nothing for you, and will come back and bite you in the butt, and you'll find that you go back into society. Whenever you go back into society, the desires and the aversions are still there in full force. And so this is why you find, as we were talking about before, you'll find many monastics who actually aren't able to give up sensuality. They find themselves indulging in it and having big widescreen televisions and so on, listening to music, etc. Because they are living the life, but not they're walking the walk. No, I don't know. The external form is good, but their minds are not actually at the point where they can give up the desires and the attachments. So that's sort of addresses the second question: is not worry too much about your ambitions, except to ask yourself the question that a Buddhist should: are you sure that they're actually a benefit to you? And once you have some sense that they're not, to the extent that you have a sense that they're not beneficial to you, to that extent you should give them up. But not to just believe the Buddha while blindly and say, okay, well, I'm going to give that up, not because I have any sense whatsoever that it's wrong for me, but because my teacher said that I should. That's not really helpful. Not in the long term. In the short term can be helpful if you're going to. In the short term, it works, but unless you then apply meditation that allows you to see it for yourself, in the end it's going to come right back and maybe even be stronger because you've just been repressing it. Okay. Final question. Desire for nirvana, which again comes down to semantics. I would say desire for nirvana could be a very bad thing because it's escapism. Not a very bad thing, but it could be a problem because it points to a desire to run away from things, desire for something not to be, which is some kind of partiality. You don't need desire to meditate. Meditation is about understanding reality. In the beginning, it can be useful. You see. Because just like any of these things, you come to meditate and you have so very passionate about meditation, so that leads you to meditate. But eventually you realize that that passion itself is getting in the way. So in the beginning it can be a good thing because it leads you to, only because it leads you to the meditation center and so on, but it leads you for the wrong reasons, with the wrong understanding, a desire to run away. Eventually you realize, oh, you can't really, that doesn't really work, and your whole reason for coming to the meditation center, ironically, is is a bad reason, or it's an unwholesome thing, you will see that, and you'll see that you have to give that up as well, and to the point that you have no desires whatsoever. You're just able to see things clearly as they are. Really, it's all about slowly, slowly giving up all desires. Once you have no desires, then you're happy, then you're satisfied. But again, it's semantic, because you could talk about a certain type of desire just meaning referring to intention, or the decision to do something that an arahant still seems to have, but it's a functional decision. If there were any reason for it not to them not being able to follow through with their desires, they wouldn't have any feeling either way. It would just be another realization that they can't, that they have to change their decision, make a new decision. So it's not really desire. All desire is, I would say, a problem. The Tao Te Ching, I get this one a lot. I'm not going to do a video, I don't think, about it, but so you don't have to. You didn't have to read that last one, right? Because we weren't doing a video. Anybody who wants to see it can see it on the YouTube video, right?
They can. I don't mind reading them in case people listen without actually watching the video.
All
Just
right, go
listen.
ahead.
In your opinion, is Buddhism and Tao Te Ching, do Buddhism and Tao Te Ching have a similar goal in some sense, or are they opposing each other?
The question is, what is the goal of the Tao Te Ching? I don't know that there is one. The Tao Te Ching, they say, it was written by a man who was leaving the world. I think Lao Tzu just means old man or something like that. I'm not sure if that's correct, but it seems to me there was something like that. He was an old man who was on a border town. This is the legend or the story. And I think this soldier came up to him and saw how profound and special he appeared. And so he asked him to write down his teachings. Maybe they had a conversation that impressed the man. And so he wrote them all down and then disappeared, something like that. And so this came to be what we now know as the Tao Te Ching. But it didn't seem that the guy had any goals. So the idea that the Tao Te Ching has any goals whatsoever, I think, is questionable. Do they have the same sorts of teachings in them? I think so. I think the Tao Te Ching has some things that would not be considered Buddhist, depending how you translate them, like the female and the male, and I can't remember. There were a couple of things that I think are not quite, they're sort of extraneous to Buddhism. But all in all, in general, I think it's a sort of thing I would expect from a Pacceka Buddha, which makes me think that that's what Lao Tzu was. Someone who was enlightened but couldn't actually teach the way to become enlightened. And so he just explained a lot. It talks a lot about what an enlightened person is like, which he would be, a Pacceka Buddha would be able to do. But it doesn't actually give a path, or I don't even think it prescribes a goal. Although it does talk about in a sense, the ideal person, a master, which does sound a lot like an enlightened being to me, for the most part.
While meditating, I
Okay,
start
let
noting.
me do a video about this one.
Okay.
Okay.
While meditating, I start noting the rising and falling like you teach. But when I completely follow noting the mind, I usually never go back to the noting rising and falling during the 10 to 20 minute meditation. Do I have to force my way back at some point?
Well, no, but I think what you do have to consider is whether you are prompting This is a common problem for meditators, that makes us prescribe a specific technique of returning to the rising and falling every time you finish noting something. So you make a kind of a conscious decision whether or not you'll actually be able to carry it out to return to the rising and falling. If you're not able to, if there's more uh, experiences to be noted, then you can note them. There's no need. Absolutely, you shouldn't force your way back. But the problem is that some people actually prompt the next one. In a sense, they're asking the question, what else? What's there? They're actually looking to find something, as opposed to simply responding to something that is distracting them from the stomach, from the rising and falling. So you should look at it that way. If it's not distracting you from the rising and falling, or the only reason you would acknowledge it is if it's distracted you, if it's already captured your attention. You shouldn't be hopping from one experience to another, in the sense of looking for the next one. To avoid this, after you've acknowledged thinking, your next move should be to return to the rising and falling. The only reason you wouldn't is if you were, in a sense, interrupted, noting thinking by pain, for example, or by an emotion, for example. If something else catches your attention while you are in the process of acknowledging the thought or the experience. Otherwise, the prompting will lead to increased distraction, increased restlessness. It's not actually conducive to insight. It's certainly not inclusive to concentration, which is an important part of the practice. So no forcing, but intentional returning whenever possible, just to keep yourself focused and keep yourself from prompting, from jumping, intentionally jumping. It's a good question. It's often asked. Okay, here we have a question about younger monks. Were those my students? Yes, those were my students. Anonymous. I hope that's not your real name. Actually, I don't mind if it is your real name. It was kind of a poor attempt at a joke. Okay, how are we doing? Should we try a canned? Do you have any good canned questions for us?
Yes.
All right. So we're not going to put the canned questions up. You'll just have to listen to them. Go ahead.
Okay. Downloading and sharing pirate files, music, books, etc. Is this against the Vinaya? Is it a rule? Is it a breaking of any rule for monks or of lay precepts? Thanks.
That's a good question.
Oh, I think so.
Well, we've answered this. I've answered this one before in other formats. I don't know if I've done a video for it. I guess it's a very pertinent question. Okay. It's complicated. The first thing to note is that you're not actually stealing anything. Nothing is being stolen, not by a Buddhist definition. Buddhist definition is appropriating something from someone else, in the sense of they had access to that, or they had mastery or dominion over something, and now they don't. With pirating, you are copying something. So the owner still has the original. They have not been deprived of anything that they already had. Now, the argument that they make is that you're depriving them of income. You are abrogating their right to control something, which in the copying, copyright, and so it is therefore unethical. See, a lot of piracy, a lot of the anti-piracy movement is propaganda by the very, very rich and powerful, who it's not really it's not really important to the question, but it's important to understand why we hold a certain understanding of the question as being stealing, theft. It's not theft. Um, I don't even think by um, old school standards of modern jurisprudence or of Western jurisprudence would it be considered theft. It's only since these guys kind of got a hold of the lawmakers, Hollywood, I guess, got a hold of the lawmakers in America and similar organizations all around the world, that it's been considered theft. You're not actually stealing anything. You are copying. If you really want to learn about copyright, and this may be a little bit off topic, but to really understand copyright, Buddhists as well are not adequately equipped, because we also mostly only get the propaganda. What we hear and learn about copyright, and why copyright is considered to be just a part of the way things are, is because the rich and powerful, the ones with the power and the money, are those who really, really want copyright, who live off copyrights. Or not live off copyrights, but are having their livelihood threatened by copyright infringement. So if you want to learn about the truth about copyright and the objective, I would say more or less unbiased truth, you should read some of the stuff written by people like I'm drawing a blank. The guy who started GNU, Richard Stallman. He's a bit controversial, but you should read what he has to say. He's biased. Let's put it that way. Cory Doctorow is a really good guy to read. If you read anything by Cory Doctorow, he's a Canadian, which I guess doesn't mean anything, but he has written some really good stuff on copyright. He gives away all of his books. He writes science fiction and other books about content and copyright and intellectual property. And so he's written some good things on the copy. He gives away all his books for free on the internet, and he's found that it actually made him more popular, more famous, and has actually made him more money by giving things away for free, because he sells his books as well. But he also, on top of getting money from books, because he's so popular, because people are reading his books, which he's saying, and just from a business point of view, is great. You don't really care. An up and coming author doesn't care so much about how many books they're selling, but they care about how many people know, or not so much about how much money they're making, but by how many people know about them, because fame is what's going to propel them. So he's also he's getting invitations to give talks, and he's become quite famous as a result of or part of it is because of he's giving stuff away. But anyway, he wrote a lot of things about it, and the point is that copyright has a long history, and it only became a problem based on technology. Eventually, in the beginning, you would actually buy a book. A person, it was what you'd expect, and this is how property really works. Someone would write a book, and someone rich would buy it, in the sense that they would, um, or sorry, they would commission it. So a person would actually pay an author a large sum of money to write a book, instead of everyone paying for not the book but the right to have a copy, of the book. And so it was a different sort of situation. And now, once printing presses became popular and there was the mass production, then you had kind of a problem. How do you pay for the printing press? Someone puts out all this money for, no, not the printing press, but puts out a lot of money for setting up the book and setting up the publishing of the book, and then can't actually make ends meet because someone else takes it and copies it as well. So it was the right of the publishing company to distribute it in order to make money, and so on. I don't know if that's actually getting to an answer. I think it's a bit of a tangent, but if you read what the things that these people say, the end that they come to is that it's not really a right to stop. You don't really have a right to stop people from copying. And in fact, even if you did have a right, it's there's no reason to think that that right overrides another person's right to copy, because we've been copying since the beginning of time. We copy from we copy everything. Everything that we know, we're using the English language. We're not paying royalties on that. Everything that we learn throughout our lives is through copying someone else's example. Progress, for the longest time, was through copying and through sharing. And it's only recently that people have begun to claim that that patents and copyrights are things that stimulate growth and stimulate invention. When, to some extent, that's true. To some extent, they are encouraging an increase in products. There's an interesting story about how who was the guy in the patent office way back when? I think it was one of the presidents or one of the founding fathers or somebody. This guy in the patent, when they first started the patent office in America, he was so impressed by how many patents or how many new inventions there were, just because there was now the ability to patent things. And so it's that kind of thinking that has sort of spurred the defense of the copyright movement. And so our general understanding nowadays is that it's somehow hypocritical to take things for free, because the only reason those things exist, it is argued, is because the person who created them is under the assumption that they're going to get paid for those things. They're going to get paid for creating that, or that through their exclusive right to the to copy, they are going to be able to live off of it. Now, that's fine and good, but it makes a assumption that if I want to make a living off of something, I should have a right to do that, and I should have a right to abrogate other people's rights in order to do that. So property is one example. We have accepted that there is the right to property. Now, it's not even certain whether such a right exists, but in order for us to be, in order for a society to function, in the case where there are limited resources, And in the case where um, people are not people, there are a good number of people, a significant number of people who want more than their share. You need property rights. If you don't have them, then people will be taking more than their share. I mean, ideally, we would be sharing things. Even this is where the idea of Creative Commons came from. The commons. In olden days, they would share land, and everyone would be able to send their livestock out and graze together on the land. Eventually, in modern times, well, not even eventually, but that kind of idea works when people are honest and harmonious and supportive of each other. But it doesn't work when everyone's at each other's throats. Then you need private property and so on. So the question is whether we should now allow a new artificial right, and that is the right to actually copy. Now, there's no question in my mind that there is something perverse about restricting the free flow of information, because regardless of whether it's your right or not to withhold some information from someone, there's something perverse about it, about doing so, because it's not costing you anything, and it's somehow infringing or impinging upon another person's actions, or another person's private life, right? Because they haven't deprived you of anything. They've just prevented you from this nifty idea you had of being able to be the only one in possession of a certain quantity of information. So this is what intellectual property means. The result that you see is now we have all these companies who have to either pay each other for patents or pay each other for companies, and we have copyright, so all sorts of intellectual property being controlled by large corporations who own the copyrights. For example, the copyright to Walt Disney, the copyright to Mickey Mouse, which is now supposed to have expired, but they keep extending it. Mickey Mouse, that was copyrighted like 75 years ago. The copyright for all sorts of books that are out of print but cannot be published and are going to be lost because their copyright has not expired. And so by the time their copyright expires and people can actually publish them, they're going to have been lost. There will be no copies of these things. We're talking about things from the 30s. Anyway, so you wind up with a restricted flow of information and a twisted form of society where, first of all, the only reason that people do things is for money, or the main reason why certain people do things is for money. So people write books for money. People make movies for money, documentaries for money. And the question is, if that is their impetus for doing it, I'm going to make this for the reason that I it encourages a subset of the population that is only doing things for money. So certain people it encourages the entertainment industry. It allows the entertainment industry to flourish, and it focuses our energies on entertainment and creates this intense concentration of our energy on that which is in the end really useless, and it's just about greed and desire and addiction. So the focus is then on what you can present to the world that is going to encourage the most amount of attachment and income. And so my main point, I'm rambling a little bit, is that it encourages there is a sense that this kind of thing perverts society, because it's no longer harmonious sharing. It's now control and having gateways to information, gateways um, to thought, in a sense. So our ability to receive a certain amount of information is restricted, our ability to share. If I want, as a monk, for example, if I want access to a certain book which has information that I need, oftentimes I'm not able to get it because I just can't pay the money, for example. So all of this is in a roundabout way trying to point out that it's not as cut and dried or black and white as it may seem, that there may be arguments in favor of this artificial right, which is that's what it is. It's the proposal, which seems to have passed already, to create a new right to restrict the copying of information that you have, come up with, whatever that means, because of course you've taken everything you know from elsewhere, and it's been passed on to you, and you're not, no one is an island in and of themselves. So to say that you own it is already sketchy. But we have this proposal to create this new right, and the question is whether that is valid, useful, beneficial, good. But no, it's not stealing. It's a question of whether this is ethical. And from a Buddhist point of view, I don't see anything wrong with it, because I consider the teachings of the Buddha, for example, and that the Buddha would have in any way tried to restrict the free flow of his teachings seems, of course, absurd. And the idea that someone should have the right to prevent, I mean, it's clinging to that information, it's clinging to that thing, and it's pure clinging, because if I cling to this glass, that's one thing, but I also need this glass to put my water in. So if you take my glass, you could just say, well, why are you clinging to the glass? Why don't you just forget about it? It's like, well, okay, yes, I was clinging to it, but I also had a use for it. So I am harmed by you taking my glass away. But if you copy my glass, then it's pure clinging. It's nothing to do with my existence. It's only this sort of intellectual concept of me being able to benefit from the restricted and sole right to copy. So I don't know. I guess my thoughts aren't fully formed on the subject, but at least 2 points. The first is that I don't think, from my point of view, I don't think it's beneficial to society, to humanity, and even to the people who are promoting copyright, the so-called creators, content creators, to encourage copyright or to promote or to uphold copyright laws. And second of all, I don't think it's certainly not stealing, and I don't personally think it's a valid right. Um, it's based on an assumption, a presumption of the ability to benefit uh, from an artificial gateway or fence, restriction to other people's access to your thoughts. You know, for example, if I can read your thoughts, does that mean I'm stealing? If I can read your thoughts, I say, "Oh, that's a good idea. I'm going to use that." Did I steal your idea? We call it stealing. You stole my idea. Hey, you stole my idea. But again, that's the question here. I think from a Buddhist point of view, that's invalid. You're not actually harming the other person. Now, that all being said, let's play devil's advocate and point out that in a society where people have already, perhaps naively, predicated, I think is the word, their livelihood on the ability uh, to restrict copying of their product. For example, someone creates a computer program and they've taken out loans, student loans, let's say, and loans for their business loans, and they've created this really useful piece of software, thinking that they should be able to sell it. There may be something to, for example, suppose another person then takes that software and uploads it to the internet for free. I'm not saying that it's unethical for them to do that, technically speaking, but it may be unethical practically, because they're ignoring the fact that their actions have the great potential to harm that person. So they know that by those actions, or they have the potential to know that by those actions that person is going to suffer. So it's in that sense a case-by-case basis. For the most part, there is no such there's not that sort. I don't even think in that case it's unethical, because suppose I do that thinking, well, this is something that will benefit the world, which is how I would do it. Suppose this person made this really great, useful application, but unbeknownst to me, let's play devil's advocate and say, suppose I did know. So known to me, this person their whole livelihood is depending on whether they can sell lots and lots of copies of that application. If they don't, they're going to be ruined. They're going to have to go bankrupt. I still don't think it's unethical for the person, because this person, the content creator has made, into my feeling, has made a unsubstantiated, an invalid assumption to be able to restrict, to have the right to restrict copy. They made a presumption that they're going to be able to make money in this way. It's also naive, because whether or not it's illegal, it's very easy to find just about anything on the internet for free. Well, lots of things, especially the more popular things. So it's unrealistic, it's unreasonable, and it's, I would say, to some extent at least, invalid. Now the question is whether you should do it or not. I think, even though it's not unethical, I think we should be circumspect about it. First of all, is it going to get us in trouble with the law, whether or not we agree with the laws? Second of all, is it actually going to create suffering for other people? So in this case, if I knew that that person was depending on it, I would say, okay, I'm going to hold off on that, because that person might commit suicide, or that person might hurt them, will suffer a lot, because naively, it's like if someone does something really stupid, and it gets them into a lot of trouble. Well, you don't want to just take advantage of their stupidity and say, well, that's your problem. You want to help them out, and you'll give them some room, to figure things out. You won't just act as you would in a normal case. So if a person has, for example, gotten into themselves terribly into debt, then you might give them discounts on your own products or something like that. That is an example. So if a person has gotten themselves into big trouble with copyright, I would say that's the only case where I could see defending copyright. But it's defending defending people who made invalid assumptions. I mean, that's very scattered, my thoughts, because it's not something that I think about regularly. And why I complained about in the beginning is it's not a question about meditation, which is really the only thing that I can answer to any. It's the only thing I'm good at answering. So you can see the difference between my answers. Answering this one was not exactly easy for me. There's a monk, Bhante Sujato in Australia. I don't know, I think he published it, but he wrote a really good blog post that summarized a lot of the good things that I was saying and a lot more good things really well, far better than I ever could, and posted it on his web blog. And I agreed with it completely at the time, so I would recommend reading that if you're interested in a Buddhist view, one Buddhist view of copyright, not all Buddhist views. Getting back to the first thing, the early things that I was talking about, is just to reiterate the fact that Buddhists really are not equipped to understand copyright. Most Buddhists don't, or many Buddhists don't understand copyright, and through inaccurate, improper understanding of copyright, they will say things like it's stealing, and you break. There was actually one layperson in Bangkok who made some programs, some computer programs for learning Pali, and sold them to monasteries, to 12-year-old novices, and he writes on them that it's breaking the most heinous rule of a monk to copy things illegally. It's a person who does that is no longer a monk, has been defeated and is immediately is subject to expulsion from the robes because they've stolen. And other things, like I was threatened with legal action for posting something something that was freely available in PDF format, posting that same thing that they were posting for free as a PDF, posting it in, for example, HTML. I did this, and immediately I got, within a day, I got a email threatening legal action from a monk, a Buddhist monk, no less. So, if you really want to understand copyright and want to get a Buddhist perspective, you really should look at the open source movement. The Linux, anything to do with Linux, anything that's written about the reasons why Linux or GNU, GNU, GNU is maybe better because they're more on the argumentative side, but anything to do with the open source movement, the FOSS movement, is really neat, because what these people are saying oftentimes is exactly in line with Buddhism, with Buddhist teaching of non-self and non-attachment and freedom, freedom and non-attachment, and benefiting others, helping yourself and helping others. And how helping yourself is the same as helping others. How the golden rule, for example, do unto others, don't keep something to yourself. If you have the information, everyone else should have the information as well, for example. It's a great thing about information, the amazing thing about the internet that isn't able to be fully realized because of copyright is the free flow of information, that you can get anything on the internet, and that's being obstructed by people who want to be able to hold on to their information. Certain people are saying, I've got this information, let me share it 1,000,000 times without losing anything. Other people are saying, for each time I share this, For each time someone shares this, they're breaking a law, they're stealing from me. People who want to hold on to the information. These people don't understand, and unfortunately many Buddhists are in that category. That any Buddhist could think that it would be in any way good to withhold information through copyright, to me is baffling, to say the least. Anyway, very long answer. Hope it was somehow interesting and useful. Just one monk's opinion. We have a chat message. Who's chatting? Oh, yes, Naga. Okay, let's get back to, we got a bunch of live ones. Okay, go for it.
I have what feels like a mental block when it comes to finding my motivation to do things I love doing, such as creating music. I'm not depressed at all, and I don't take drugs. Will meditation help me unblock and find myself again? Thank you. Much love.
Will meditation motivate you? Will meditative motivate you to... No, will meditation create desire in you? Passion? No, no, meditation won't do this. Unfortunately for you, or fortunately, but unfortunately in the sense that we say unfortunately in these situations, it'll do the opposite. Meditation will probably motivate you to give up and to denounce things like creating music. Mahasi Sayadaw said, most people don't appreciate the Dhamma, the Buddha's teaching. It goes perfectly counter to the world. It goes perfectly counter to those things that people hold, ordinary people hold valuable, like creating music. I'm not depressed at all, and I do not take drugs, and that is somehow significant. Significant because some people's lack of motivation, might be due to depression. But in your case, you just can't be bothered because, and I will tell you, because the reason why, I'm assuming actually, but I think it's a good assumption, is because you're feeling the arbitrariness of your attachments. We don't cling to things because they're valuable. We cling to things because we've come to convince ourselves that they're valuable. Arbitrarily, completely, 100% arbitrarily, in the beginning, that they are valuable. That's a profound thing that I don't think is understood well enough. You assume, and it goes back to the human thing as well, you assume that liking music means that music has some intrinsic value. It doesn't. It doesn't have any intrinsic value. There's nothing even to indicate an intrinsic value in it. To understand that, though, requires you to deconstruct entirely what it means to be human, what it means to be sophisticated, what it means to be happy, and all of our presumptions and assumptions about right and wrong, natural, unnatural, all of these things are getting in the way of that. And so we wind up with a belief that music has artistic philosophical. The music is good for the soul, that it has value, soul value, you know, value to the soul. So how many constructs does it take to get there? You have to construct a soul, which is in turn predicated on a presumption of entities, of things being able to exist outside of the momentary experience of them. It's predicated on, or it stems from, let me see, it stems from the belief that pleasure is somehow satisfying. Basically, let's say that's the basic premise that is required, because at the core of the reasons why we like music, to take this example, is apparently a simple pleasure that comes from being able to anticipate. And what music does is it provides us a rhythm that we can get into, and this allows the, actually I'm grasping here, but I'm pretty sure what it's doing is allowing the pleasure centers in the brain to fire repeatedly, you know, and rhythmically, and so you get that pleasure. This is why, you know, you're in that, and then you suddenly get a stimulus that is unpleasant. So I'm listening to my music, and then my mother comes in and starts yelling at me to turn it off. Why that immediately infuriates me has to do with the disruption of the perception of pleasure from the music, from the rhythm, actually. This is why jazz music, I'm grasping, I don't have scientific evidence for this, but this is an assumption that this is why jazz music is jazzy, because it's exciting. You're not actually able to predict. So you're constantly being challenged by the music to fall into that. Never so much that it's going to jar you out of it, but it's not quite, you know, it's playing with you. So it's the spice. It's no longer just pop rock or kids music. It's now kind of pleasure spiked with pain, which, you know, creates tension when you can't get what you want for a second and then you can get it, right? The chase leads to excitement, adrenaline. So it's playing with actually all of the different chemicals. The music is able to play with all these chemicals. But in the end, that's what it is. Now, this has evolved into assumptions based on concepts which are totally artificial, like art, culture, the soul, humanity, and so on and so on, that has turned us into real snobs. And most people are snobbish about their music, especially musicians. So people who create music, I was a musician, we can get very snobbish, and it becomes it actually takes on an ego of its own. But the point that I'm making is that in the end, it's all artificial. It's meaningless. It's nothing. Even that pleasure, the pleasure centers in the brain, even the fact that those are pleasurable is something that is an understanding that we've acquired. It's an ignorance. It's based on ignorance. It's a delusion that we've acquired, more or less arbitrarily, but systematically, and as a species, we've come to agree on it for the most part.
Bante,
Mm-hmm.
chanting, Buddhist chanting, it can be sing-song, not unlike music.
No, it shouldn't be. In fact, monks are not allowed to sing song, they're chanting.
Really?
Yeah, though nowadays you can see how it's falling apart. It's funny how more and more and more you'll see crazy sing-song chanting. Really crazy. Like, it's embarrassing, really, because it's like when your friends come over and they see your father drunk or something. So, sorry, I'll adjust this. Um, when your friends come over and see your parents drunk or misbehaving themselves, like I had a party. I'm not going to go. No, well, we've all had that. Um, that's kind of what it's like because I deal with Westerners. So whenever Western people come to Thailand or so on and come and see the monks, and then they get this where monks are singing, for example, I don't know what to say. It's like, do you denounce them? Well, you can't denounce your parents. Do you defend them? Well, you can't defend something that's indefensible. So you're put in an awkward position, which is why I don't like to spend too much time in cultural monasteries.
I had no idea.
Hmm. So did I completely ruin your chance for asking that question?
That's good information. Good to know.
Yeah, the Buddha said singing is like is considered wailing in Buddhism. Dancing is considered insanity. And he gave when he said that monks aren't allowed to sing the chant, put a melody to the chants. He gave reasons for that. He said, if you chant beautifully, you become intoxicated by your voice. The listener becomes intoxicated by your voice. And there was a third, I think, reason. Or there's at least 3 reasons. I can't remember. But he gave specific reasons for it. And I always think about that, even though I can't now remember them all. And it's so obvious. I mean, how could you? We're just deluding ourselves into thinking that somehow it's not there. Anytime your chanting is beautiful, what's going to happen? How could you not become intoxicated by it? How could you not become enchanted by it and therefore cultivate desire for it, attachment to it? How could it possibly not? So chanting should be actually quite... Christian chanting is much better because, well, there is something kind of haunting about it, but Catholic monks or so on, their chanting is much more inspiring. Now, some Buddhist chanting is quite inspiring, and I'm just particular about which chanting that is. I like Sri Lankan chanting, ordinary Sri Lankan chanting, not there's the funny stuff as well. They've got a real tradition now of funny stuff, the sing-song stuff. But ordinary Sri Lankan chanting I like because it's quite simple. I guess it's my version of Sri Lankan chanting. I found that a 2-tone chant is best. I tried doing a monotone, and I'm not sure why, but that's harder on the voice, probably because of how the vocal cords work. Probably a high tone and a low tone use different parts of the vocal cord, or one of them is tensing it, and so you can't keep it tense that long. I don't know. But if I do 2 tones, it's more comfortable. So I'll do Iti piso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho Vijja charana sampanno sugato lokavido Anuttaro purisa dhamma sarati satta deva manussanam. So up and down. It sounds almost like I'm singing it with the 2 tones, but I'm doing it for my own benefit. And I think that's appropriate, for example. But I wouldn't go any further than that. Anyway, so that's the first part of your question. But the assumption that you have here, will meditation help me unblock? Let's go more general and talk about that. Will meditation help us to unblock the things that are good about us? So to some extent it will. It will help you to straighten out your mind, and I would bet I'm going to have to retract something I said, because I think in the beginning it would help you become more in tune with your music, potentially, because something is blocking, there's blockage, right? And that could be organic, that could be mental. So it could be physical or it could be a mental block. Um, Meditation will help to sort out those blocks, put you more in tune with your desire for music, your attachment for music, your love for music. It'll put you more in tune with those core, strong emotions and desires that you have. That doesn't mean those desires are in any way good or useful. So everything I said is still valid, except where I said that it will immediately distance you from them. No, it won't in the beginning. In fact, it may actually increase your desire for music. Unfortunately, unfortunately, because that's going to then lead you on the wrong path. But eventually, then you'll come back to where you are again, potentially come back to right where you are again, because the music will, in the end, hurt you. That's the word. It'll dull your mind to the extent that you can no longer, you'll lose your passion again. Anyway, the meditation helps you get in touch with these things because you're no longer um, cultivating the qualities that you're no longer as complicated. You're much more streamlined. The brain becomes more streamlined, more efficient, and the mind also becomes more streamlined and more efficient. But finding yourself again. So will meditation help me unblock and find myself again? Yes, I think it will also help you find yourself in a symbolic way. Doesn't mean you will find your soul, but it will help you to center yourself. And it won't be again, it will be anew. And if you keep practicing meditation, it will help you see things that you didn't realize. That in fact, your love of music, to some extent, probably ironically, was instrumental, partially instrumental, in leading you away from music. Because your love of music will pollute your mind and will dull in your mind to the extent that you can no longer produce the music that your pure and fresh mind was able to do. That's it's not necessarily the case in your situation, but quite often and quite potentially, quite it's a real potential. And if not, if not directly, then the livelihood involved with the life involved with creating music, the drugs, the alcohol, the sex, the just the debauchery that's generally associated with it. Not always, but often, will certainly play a part. In my case, anyway, play a part in your inability to be as creative as you used to be. People who are truly creative have to have a very pure and sharp and profound mind. I guess a good example, and it's just grasping at straws, would be Bob Dylan, who he was one of the guys I always looked up to. I'm not certainly the only one, but it's interesting if you hear what he has to say about himself. He says he can't do the things he used to do before. He's not able. I mean, I guess that part of it has to do with age as well. But when he was young, he just had such a he didn't even know where it was coming from, but he was just able to come up with the most incredible creativity that eventually went. He said it went not dry, but yeah, it disappeared, it faded away, and he was no longer able to do that. And so an argument could be made for the actual lifestyle that it led to, a lot of drugs and alcohol and or I don't know how much, but just the attachment to sensuality involved with it. I don't know. Anyway, not to say anything about him particularly. Maybe I shouldn't actually pick people out like that, but an argument could be made. So it will help you hopefully to find yourself anew and to realize some things you didn't realize about music and the fact that it is an artificial construct and not really of any intrinsic benefit to you. It's not actually making you happy. What was the chant I just did? Which chant did I just do? I think it's the iti piso. It's reflection of the Buddha. It's one of the first chants you learn as a Buddhist, as a Theravada Buddhist. Besides Namo Tassa. Iti piso, indeed, he is Bhagava, the Blessed One, Arahang, worthy, Samma Sambuddho, fully self-enlightened, Vijja Charana Sampanno, well endowed with knowledge and conduct, Sugato, well gone, Lokavidu, the knower of worlds, Anuttaro Purisa Dhammasarati, Anuttaro Sarati, Anuttaro Purisa Dhammasarati. You can break that up. I'm not sure whether you should or not. Anuttaro means unexcelled or unsurpassed. Purisa Dhammasarati, tamer of... Hello?
Hello, hi. Sorry, it's Cyrus. So I'm just joining in.
Yeah. Welcome.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just answering a question. Sarati, Dhammasarati, the Purisa Dhammasarati, the charioteer for people who are, the tamer, the trainer of those beings who are to be trained. Satta Deva Manusanang, the teacher of humans and angels. Buddho. Right. Indeed, that blessed one is in the beginning, because in Buddho Bhagava. Buddho means the enlightened one and the blessed one. Bhagava is the blessed one. Okay, it's 6:30 and I feel like I didn't answer that many questions. But I'm going to have to stop there, because that's an hour and a half.
Okay. Maybe next time.
So if you asked a question and it wasn't answered, hold on to it and bring it next time. All right, I'm going to go through some quickly here. Oh, here's one that just says Dear Bhante, so that's not really a question. Okay, I'm going to answer all of these then, but I'm going to do it quickly. We'll call this the Blitz portion. Okay, meditation strongly amplifies the cravings in the mind. It feels like symptoms of withdrawal and nearly drives me crazy. Mindfulness should be the key to, but does it have to be this rough? How to make it a little smoother? Well, there's no way to avoid the problems that you have. You need patience, and it's, in German they say, wie man sich bettet, so liegt man. As you make your bed, so you lie in it. There's no escape. This is karma. Now you're understanding karma. It's not reasonable to say it should be smoother. If it's rough, well, there's a reason for that. You just got to be patient. There's no reason to be opposed to it being rough. Okay, a complex question, but keep it simple. What do you have to say about free will? Is everything predestined, or are we going to naturally evolve to ultimate enlightenment eventually? No, there's no reason to think we're going to be naturally enlightened. Free will and determinism, I think, are just, they're predicated on the idea of the existence of a self. They're predicated on the paradigm, a paradigm of entities and paradigm of a universe outside of experience. Buddhism doesn't have anything to say on either one, I don't think. That's a real big claim there. I don't think Buddhism deals with that. It's their abstractions, free will and determinism. Free will assumes something outside of the experience. So does determinism. There's only experience, so it doesn't really apply. It's like we are living our life, so whether it's out of free will or not isn't entirely important. It's important to understand to what extent we affect, our actions affect the world around us, to what extent we can force ourselves and force reality, or not force. But it's not important to have the idea that I have free will, or reality is deterministic, impersonal, because that reality doesn't exist. There's only experience. How much of a threat are poisonous or deadly animals for monks in Sri Lanka or Thailand? I don't know. As much as anyone living in the forest. I got bitten by a poisonous snake, didn't die, in the forests of Sri Lanka. I mean, they're not that bad. They're just animals, they're not monsters. What do you have to say about self-doubt? What would one do to overcome this? Practice meditation and give up the self. How should one deal with, how do you say that, Acadia? Are those little locust-like things? Is it a common problem? No, I don't know what that is at all. Can you Google that for me?
Yes. Acedia is a state of listlessness or torpor, of not caring or not being.
I see. Huh. That's crazy. There's a word out there that I've never heard.
Oh, I'm sorry, not being concerned with one's position or condition in the world.
I see. Well, the only reason to not just sit down and wither away, is habit of hunger. There's no other reason. Arahants actually do that sometimes, apparently. Just sit down and pass away. But they tend to be still beholden to the world as well. The other thing is not just hunger, but people's expectations. So if you have any connection with any other person, then generally that connection will encourage you to take the path of least resistance and eat, for example. Oops, wait, no. We lost it. Answered questions. Cool, I can repost it. I'm about to join a monastic community. I'd like to ordain one day. That's not a question. Skillful means in dark times when disrobing seems to become attractive. What thoughts guard you? What practices to overcome disrobing thoughts? I don't know. I've never really had them. But it's hard. I think for someone who wants to disrobe, it's very difficult to keep them in the robes. It's a sign that you are probably going to disrobe. If you're thinking about it, for the most part, generally it means you were never really prepared for the monastic life. So if you're not sure that you want to ordain, the other side of it is if you're not sure that you want to ordain, 100% sure, if you're not 100%, don't ordain, because you're probably going to have those thoughts and they're probably going to lead you to this room. Is it true that monks cannot touch females? If so, why not? Well, because they're practicing celibacy. Only the male monks can touch females, because they're trying to be celibate, so it's reasonable to assume that that's difficult if you're touching women. And finally, what sect of Buddhism are you a part of? Theravada Buddhism. And that's all. Hey, we got a bunch of people in our hangout. How is everyone this evening? No answer.
Quiet.
Hello, Bante.
Hi, Naga. How are you?
How are you? I'm good.
This is the tea portion of the night where we sit around and chat.
Okay, now I get to ask the really good question.
We're still broadcasting live.
Yes.
So you can ask.
Can I ask the really good question?
All right.
Sometimes you just drink tea right directly out of a teapot. Do you not have any teacups?
It's water. It's not tea. It's cold water.
Oh, okay.
I have found the perfect vessel for keeping water in my room is a teapot. Because the spout acts as a straw. You can actually, because it goes down to the bottom, you can actually suck the water out as though it were a straw. And I don't know if we can top that question, really. I think we're done. Oh, another thing is I've got 998 videos on YouTube, and I think there's one more to go up. So this is it. This week was the week we hit 1,000 videos. It will be the week that we hit our 1,000th video.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
I don't know what that says.
It's a lot of work.
A lot of time on my hands.
Bhante, if you're saying that having music as the sound effects, for me, I think meditation helped me to be able to listen to the lyrics and understand them compared to before. For me, it's almost like reading a book from the singer. So how can it be, how can it be not same as reading book?
Well, why are you singing it? Why aren't you just saying it?
Why don't I say it?
I mean, why isn't the person just saying it? Generally, it's because there's something about it. The essence of it is musical, which implies passion and attachment and so on. Emotion. Music is emotional. It's not. Yeah. So if I were to just start, I mean, that's the thing. If I were to just start singing instead of speaking to you, then it would have the same meaning, right?
Yes.
And so yes, technically there's no problem there. But the problem is that it's going to, what the singing is going to do, not what the words are going to do.
I think I
I think
agree
that's
because
why I'm kind of always debating myself with the music. I have a passion for music, but then it kind of conflicts with Buddhism, so I'm always debating on it.
sometimes you get a song caught in your head and you can't get it out. It makes it kind of hard to be mindful.
But if giving up music makes me suffer, then I should not give up.
Hmm. Iconicity. Hmm. Hmm. All right. I'm going to sign off then.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Missing.
Bhante.
So good night, everyone. Be well. See you the next time.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.